Welcome to the Embodiment podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with embodiment specialists from around the world. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. On the show today, Steve Rowe. So Steve is a very senior martial artist. He's an 8th degree black belt, founder of Shikon, mostly known for karate. So he goes right back into karate. He's also a published columnist for Martial Arts Illustrated, which is one of the main martial arts magazines in the UK. He has got a 3rd degree black belt in Aido, first dan in Jodo, first dan in Jiu-Jitsu. He's also a Tai Chi teacher. He's kind of a big deal in the martial arts world. He's also known for his bad sense of humor. So there's going to be some jokes, no doubt, today. So Steve, welcome.
Thank you. It's 9th degree black belt. And
9th degree, excuse me.
Yeah, just an extra one added on. And I stopped writing for Martial Arts Illustrated a while back now because blogging is the way to go.
You've got a blog, haven't you? We'll give people a link to that at the end. I must have been looking at an old bio there. Well, it's great to have you on the show. I've been following you on Facebook for a few years. We have a few friends in common. Are you up in the northwest of the UK?
No, I'm down in the southeast, in Chatham in Kent.
Oh, you're in Kent. Excuse me, I'm getting everything wrong today. So why don't we just hand it over to you then? I can't get any more wrong. So what was the beginning of your journey into being interested in the body and martial arts in particular?
Well, I think I was a young guy that was brought up in the usual council estate in South London. My father was a prison officer. He was a commando during the war. So I suppose it was a typical South London type upbringing. I didn't really go to school, didn't like it. So I bunked off whenever I could. Didn't really take any exams. Had a load of jobs when I left school. My brother was the one that started in martial arts in the mid-1960s. And I suppose that really is what piqued my interest. I think it was more the fact as well. I was intrigued because in those days, back in the 1960s in South London, you didn't really ever see Oriental people. The Orientals weren't very popular anyway because it was just post-Second World War. So it was something really different. It was something exotic. And to be honest, I think it was the Japanese Kanji. It was the calligraphy, the fact that they wrote in pictures that really appealed to me. And from there, I think it was also watching the karate. It was so different. That intrigued me. Being a South London guy, I really wanted to learn to fight. And I must say that fighting was probably the most fascinating part for me. I'd naturally, as I left school, I went into the fire brigade and then I moved into the security world. And from 1971, I worked in the security world really, and I'm still teaching it now. So the combative side really interested me, but I realised that violence wasn't the answer. I realised that violence was only making me worse. Whenever I did martial arts, I only wanted to fight. At that time, I wasn't interested in kata or anything like that. And I got to the point where I realised if I didn't get rid of the violent part of me, that I'd probably end up in prison, particularly working in the security trade. I got to realise that politeness, courtesy, good manners, soft skills took me a lot further than just being rude and violent. That led me into Tai Chi when David Carradine came on television in Kung Fu. The Shaolin Temple really intrigued me, and that made me want to study Tai Chi. So in the early 70s, I sought out a Tai Chi teacher, and he gave me a copy of the Tao Te Ching. And from the moment really that I opened the Tao Te Ching, I was absolutely fascinated. And that took me on to a lifelong study of Taoism, Zen, Buddhism. It took me into the Western side. I studied paganism, Wicca, ritual magic, anything to do with energy, really. And so I suppose really from about 76, when I was in my mid-20s, I probably changed completely from being a complete yob to hopefully a much nicer person.
Great. So I want to draw out a few strands there. There's a few things that I, kind of hear repeatedly from different guests, and even though they're from different arts, we have people on here from dance and yoga and all sorts. And the first is the sort of the appeal of the exotic. So I'm imagining, Britain in this early 60s is not very multicultural like it is today. And it's something that seems exotic. These kanji, I remember when I first saw Aikido, it was the hakamas and the sort of ritual. And it was something in that I was like, wow, that's new, as a young guy, that's different, that's exotic. And that often seems to kind of open the door for people, doesn't it? That exotic appeal.
I think so, yeah. And most certainly, the idea of really just looking at kanji, it was just so different from everything that we did. The Oriental way, I mean, particularly looking at that time at the Japanese way, it was the opposite. The whole culture was the opposite to ours. They kind of never talked in the first person. It was always like, the author says, they have this saying, if a nail sticks up, knock it down. The apparent humility that they were teaching, I was completely awestruck by it all.
You're right. So there is that exotic appeal, and then, as you say, then there's the practical, isn't there? It's just like, okay, I want to learn to fight. And before people necessarily get into the spiritual or the philosophical or the healing arts, there's often that just very practical kind of first like, all right, but does this work?
Yeah. I'd really been brought up, not in a violent way, but a typical sort of South London, ran with the gangs, got myself into a lot of fights, which led to really working in the security trade and sort of quite often being on the sharp end of violence. You kind of gain a reputation through it, you gain a name through it, you gain some status through it. Sometimes there is an enjoyment in causing harm. If you get a really good sort of right hander on someone, there's a carnal pleasure out of it.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I know, a lot of people listening to this might sound like, wow, these guys are psychos, they're really sick. But actually, I think that urge is in all of us, actually. And the first time I kind of hit someone in the face and they kind of crumpled, and I'm sort of standing there victorious, the ego kind of gets huge, and there's that sort of very animal pleasure of, wow, I've just dominated someone that was trying to hurt me here. And that is seductive in its own way, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And a lot of people that I know from those days, a lot of people that I've taught, because since then I've taught in the security world for many years. I've taught the president's bodyguards in the Czech Republic, their special services, their police use my self-defense system. So a lot of people that I teach are either law enforcement or security. So we kind of encounter violence quite a bit. And those, particularly things like nightclub doormen as well, often they really do find pleasure in violence. It's the reputation. Some doormen, it's hard to give up.
Because of the ego of it, because of the kind of, as you say, the kudos, isn't there, as well, being known as a hard guy, being known as a person not to mess with. There's a certain respect that people are giving you as they come in the club or whatever.
Yeah. And and sort of taking that to the next stage, there's a sense of balance, because when you're looking for peace, you get to realise that peace is earned. An awful lot of people talk about peace being a natural state. In my experience, peace is balance. So if you don't have the yang, you can't balance it with the yin.
And let's talk more about that, because that is very interesting to me. I know a little birdie tells me you work with some very, very serious people, particularly in Eastern Europe. I know you've got a lot of students out there who are involved in some very, very hardcore things. And as you say, there's someone saying, well, I'm a peaceful guy, but actually I don't know how to swing a punch anyway. I mean, how valid is that compared to someone saying, well, actually, I really know my way around violence, but I've chosen the way of peace? It's quite a different thing at that point, isn't it?
Yes, because I can only speak from my perspective, and that was the way that I came to it. But I don't doubt there are many routes or roads to the same understanding and capacity. Mine came through martial arts and, if you like, physical violence, but it brought me to a state of peace. It taught me how to earn peace, and how to not be bullied, how to not be pushed around, how to not allow people to disrupt my life and the life of those around me, and still almost on a weekly basis, you have to stand up for yourself, even in small ways. So you won't be peaceful if you're weak. If you're weak, other people will dominate you and bully you.
Yeah, we had Paul Linden on the show with a sort of similar message about power and love being two sides of the same thing. And, being a victim is allowing violence. It's just violence on the other side. And, I was in the NHS yesterday talking to some receptionist, teaching some receptionist. And I said, look, you've got a right to stand up for yourself. If someone's abusive, I can teach you stress management and how to relax and how to breathe. But sometimes you might need to say to someone, you don't speak to me like that. And if you continue, you need to get out of here. And to tell them that is also completely part of kindness and looking after oneself, just verbally in the first instance, right?
Yeah, I think a large message that we teach, and the same goes for children as for adults, is that first and foremost, your body belongs to you. And absolutely nobody, child or adult, has the right to touch it if you don't want them to. Your personal space is something that you need to be able to control. And you don't let anybody into your personal space unless you want them in there. So the time, because for most people that are bullied, they miss the opportunity, they miss the chance to deal with something. So the idea that when somebody reaches the edge of your personal space, that's the point that you deal with them. If you want to know when to act, that's it. And at that point, you can reach out and say, get out of my face.
Yeah, because if someone's, coming right up close to you, they can headbutt you and there's very little you can do about it or whatever. The thing is, if they're already dominating you at that point as well, psychologically, aren't they? If they're already doing that, that makes a lot of sense. I know you do programs with kids on sort of bully-proof coaching, as it were, for kids, right?
That's right. Yeah. And again, that's where, from my own experience, the things that help most, first of all, is politeness, courtesy, understand how to talk to people, understand how to be nice, how to be patient, kind, tolerant, compassionate, because one, that keeps you out of trouble, and it's the right way to act. It's how humans interact, but you do it from a position of strength, and you need that switch where you can go from being polite and courteous, where you can be very yin and help people whenever and wherever you can. But if somebody's going to take liberties, if somebody's going to take advantage, you need that switch to be able to immediately go into yang and say, that's where you stop.
Yeah, there's sort of two ways people go wrong here, isn't there? One is even not having the politeness, the rei, the foundation of Japanese martial arts, I think, as we'd probably both understand it. And I always, when I'm in martial arts conferences and Aikido camps, I'm noticing sort of how polite people are to each other. And it's something that I see. I had Philip Smith on here the other day talking about that from the Aikido world. And actually in some other arts where people don't have necessarily the kind of ability to back it up, it actually can be ruder. It's interesting, or feeling that makes you a good person if you're just to be nice, but it's not enough just to be nice, isn't it? There needs to be something to back that up.
Well, and if you're strong, you can afford to be nice. You can afford to be kind. You can afford to be patient and compassionate, because if something does go wrong, you've got the capacity to deal with it. And I think it's not only just with violence, but with an authoritative manner as well. It can be, even if you went out to buy a washing machine, a salesman is pushing you, tell you what he wants to sell you. He wants to sell you an insurance with it. He wants to sell you something that's going to earn them a lot of money, and you've gone in there to buy one specific thing. It can be difficult for a lot of people to just stand up for themselves, just buying a washing machine or a computer or something. So having that authoritative power is really important.
Yes, and certainly you talked about people's bodies being their own. I sort of see this sexually as well. And one of the things my niece is 7, and one of the things I'm teaching is I don't pick her up without asking her. I don't just grab her. I say, is it all right if I pick you up? So I'm trying to give her that message the whole time that her body's hers, and I'm not just ruffling her hair where I feel like it or whatever, because I don't want her to be getting that impression that people can just, even in non-sexual, completely innocent way, even to touch her. It's like, I want her to have that message, like, my body's mine. And without blaming victims at all, because that's never okay, there's also this side that people aren't taught to do this, right? We're taught to conform in school. We're not taught to say no.
That's right. And I think that it's very cultural now, that even obviously we have a lot of children coming and going. We have a lot of parents coming or going. You can see the interaction between parents and children. And I suppose, at 67, I'm old enough that I've probably made most of the mistakes myself. But you see parents where the parent is the child and the child appears to be the parent. The child is shouting and screaming at the child. And, they're shocked when a child shouts back or is truculent back, but they don't realise that's the message that they're giving them. If the parents are impatient, and teachers and in schools, if teachers are impatient, if they treat children that way, they've only got to expect to be treated back in the same way. And it's the way that children are being taught generally, which is why we spend a lot of time in the dojo teaching them good manners. We teach them how to talk to each other, ask questions of each other, how to listen to what the other person's saying. We teach them how to shake hands, how to introduce themselves, all the things that are rarely taught in this day and age. But they're the things that will make the difference in life wherever you go.
Yeah. And I think... Sorry.
I used to recruit a lot of security personnel. I was just saying, I used to recruit a lot of security personnel, and it's amazing the amount of people that can't look you in the eye, shake hands, give you their name, ask you for your name, give a brief explanation of what they want. We get people that phone up just to inquire about the dojo, and you pick the phone up and they say something like, "Where are you?" I'm sitting behind this.
Yeah, sure. The basic civility of like, "Hi, this is my name. Who am I speaking with?"
Exactly.
This is what I'm after.
Or they just go, "How much is it?" And you say, "Well, how much is what? Straight sex or what?"
Yeah, and I think this is what people don't realize necessarily outside of the martial arts is the role of the martial arts for some time has been character education, right? That's how they're viewed in Japanese schools today, where the kids do a lot of kendo and judo. It's viewed as in the way we might view sort of finishing school in the kind of Victorian era, or it's character education primarily. And it's Japan's a very safe place. Very few Japanese are interested in it as a fighting art, but it's educating the person.
Yeah. And from the beginning, where you bow as you enter the dojo, and when you train with everybody else, you train with politeness, humility, gentleness. But the moment that you're going to do, say, for instance, some pairs work, the moment that you come up from the bow there, you need that switch from yin to yang. And that's how we train it. We train it that you're always nice to each other, you're always polite to each other. But the moment you get to pairs work, as you bow, as you come up to the bow, you go to completely yang, and you become the opponent, if you like, or training partner that is actually going to work in a very powerful way to help train each other with the yang side of their nature. It's still compliant in a way, but it's compliant in a very yang way. We actually mean what we do. And I think that kind of training is really important.
Yeah, it's important to have training that you can trust, isn't it? So otherwise, if you've never had that kind of training, and maybe it's not for everyone all the time, but at some point in your life, there's an insecurity is what I see behind martial artists who haven't had some quite serious training, whatever they are. And there's an insecurity in them because they know in their heart of hearts, they can't really rely upon what they've got. Do you understand what I mean? Like, in a way, it's saying when you're a doorman, you must have really sort of figured out, okay, this is practical. There are some things that really work here, and then you can trust it, which, as you said, enables you to be able to afford to be the gentle guy or the patient guy.
Yeah, and it depends on who you are, the system that you train in. You do Aikido. Two very good friends of mine, of course, are Robert Mustard and Joe Tambu, and you couldn't meet two nicer, more polite guys there. And dependent on the art, you'll get some people that will train within an art for self-defense, and some that will train just for the art itself, and they're not interested in self-defense. Because of my background, the system that I teach was based in self-defense. Because of the area that I teach in and that I live in, and the people that I teach, it has to be a very practical self-defense aspect. But, when you use the word self-defense, first of all, the thing that's most likely to kill you is your own health.
Yeah.
So health, in self-defense, health comes first. The second, that's going to give you most trouble in your life, is your mind, sanity. So we have to train to be sane. So emotional intelligence is a very important part of that. The third part is your reaction with other people, and therefore to learn how to talk to people, how to deal with people, how to be nice, how to be courteous is a very important part of that. So self-defense is not just cracking skulls. You've got to go through a sequence. You've got to look after your own body. You've got to look after your mind. You've got to look after relationships with other people. And child or adult, that's the process that we go through. So the end result really is very similar. But some people will just train for the art, and I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
When I did Iaido, we weren't thinking about killing each other with swords. It's a Zen art. You're using the sword in a way to develop your inner self. You're not going to walk outside carrying a sword. My training system is very street oriented, but it is done so because the people that I teach need that kind of self-defense. But I think my role is to teach them in a more holistic way.
Yeah, and people sometimes ask me, have you ever used your Aikido or your Jiu-Jitsu or your boxing or anything like that? Have you ever used it? And I said, yeah, this one time I fell over and I did it on an icy floor. And I did a really good fall. I didn't hurt myself. And they go, no, but have you ever used it? I say, yeah, today I was really stressed about some work stuff and I'm going to go train tonight and I'm going to be a lot less stressed afterwards. So I'll probably have a better conversation with my wife in the evening. And they're like, no, but have you ever used it? And they keep wanting to hear the war stories. And I've got a couple. You've probably got way more. But it's like, no, I'm not. I'm sort of joking with them. But I'm also saying, look, that's the really important thing. Like I fell over more times than I've got in a fight. You know, it's the health, the mental health, the relationships. That's how it helps me day to day.
Of course, mostly now I teach Tai Chi. And although Tai Chi is also a combative art, the important thing with Tai Chi, the thing that I love most is the structure. And we always start with the Neigong, and the Neigong is the inner work. So we practice Neigong through meditation and through the standing postures. And the standing postures will give us the yin and the yang. So we would start with stand tall, breathe deep, focus your mind. And then from there, the mind's got to be aware, sensitive, focused, and intense. And from there, we will go through the Qigong, which is the exercise system that will open the joints of the body. It will open all the myofascia. So combined with deep breathing, good stretching, that will give the health side of it. But it's part of an integrated system that when you get to the techniques, and in the Yang Tai Chi, when you do the Yang Cheng Fu form, the sort of standard 108 form, that is done in what we would call monk style, where you're still working on being very peaceful, very careful. And then we will go on to, from there, once that's been mastered, it's kind of emptying yourself first before you sort of sprinkle the martial fairy dust in. You've got to kind of get rid of all the crap that you've got in there first. Most people are tense, most people are anxious, so we need to deal with that first. And then we can put the martial fairy dust in when we're doing the long boxing. And that's where we would introduce like what they call the Fa Jin and so on.
And can you talk a bit about yin and yang? Because, it's central to Chinese philosophy, to Tai Chi, and many people have seen the kind of symbol on the surfboards and those sort of things. But what is yin and yang? How would you explain that to someone?
Well, its proper name, of course, is the Tai Chi symbol. Although it's commonly known as the yin and yang, actually it is the Tai Chi symbol. And people say that the yin yang symbol represents Tai Chi. Actually, it's the other way around. The Tai Chi symbol came first, and originally what's now known as Tai Chi was known as soft cotton boxing, because the opponent would put their hands into soft cotton. They wouldn't feel a thing, and they would feel just the sharp needle inside. Or it was called deceptive boxing, meaning kind of the same thing. So it had lots of names before it was Tai Chi. So it was only really when Yang Luchan was teaching the emperor's bodyguards and dealing with the various challenges that came along that one of the scholars actually called it Tai Chi and named it Tai Chi. So it's kind of not the way around most people think. Tai Chi is the name of the symbol, and the Tai Chi training system came from that symbol when it was named that way. Now, if you look at it in the sense of the circle around the outside of the Tai Chi symbol represents infinity, because it's a never-ending circle. And from a Taoist point of view, we're not born into this world, we're born out of this world. So we're born from this world. So from, if you like, the Tao, or from the infinite, we become into this world, and in so doing, we can only recognize things through their opposing energies. So our mind only knows it's warm because it gets cold. We only know we're a male if we know a female. We only know it's light because it gets dark. If it was light all the time, you wouldn't even know it was light. So our sense of recognition, our way of recognizing what's inside the infinite, which becomes the finite, it becomes the finite because it's got an opposing force. So when we look at the aspects of Yin and Yang, or to stay on the symbol for a moment, so therefore, if the symbol was still, it would be a straight line down the middle. But of course, it's spinning. So the universe is seen in action. Once we create action, we create a spiral.
Yeah, people don't realize that about the symbol, right? It's actually meant to be a representation of motion. It's not meant to be just a picture.
Exactly. So the line down the center that balances yin and yang could be seen as our lifeline. We come out of the Tao and we return back to the Tao, and all the time that we are in motion, we will experience yin and yang, and our ability to be able to harmonize those two forces will give us a better sense of peace. So if we can walk that line down the middle and balance the ideas, as we were saying earlier, you earn peace. You have to have yang. You can't just be all yin, and you can't just be all yang. If you're more yin than yang, you will suffer. And if you're more yang than yin, you will suffer. So we're looking for that harmonization, that peace. So bringing that into, say, for instance, the Tai Chi symbol. And I know I thought I'd better watch a couple of your videos before we had this chat, and I see you use the ABC system, which is very kind of Tai Chi-fied as well. So we look for that kind of balance. We look for the balance between mind, breath, and body. We look for the balance of left and right. We harmonize through the joints, left and right, ankles, knees, hips, shoulders. We balance upper and lower. So we ankles to the wrists, the knees to the elbows, and so on. So everything that we're doing is to create that balance. We use the yin and yang standing postures to understand yin and yang, because when you stand in what most people would call standing post, which is a yin posture, you can feel the energy in your body returning back to the inner organs, and you can feel it's nourishing the body. When you turn the hands over at the wrists, which are the gates for yin and yang, and you bow the three bows of the body, you experience a yang energy really powerfully. So we get a direct experience. When we stand in yin, we rest our emotions on patience, kindness, tolerance, and compassion. When we stand in yang posture, we focus on courage, resolve, determination, and power. And that's how we work the two aspects of our character to develop the emotional intelligence.
I love this model. It's so rich and so profound. There's so many uses. When I'm working on like sexual attraction with groups, I talk about it a lot because the polarity between people, and when I'm talking about like stress workshops yesterday, I was saying, you've got to like listen to people, but also stand up for yourself. You've got to accept things, but also change things. The serenity prayer is an expression of yin and yang. To change the things you need to change and to accept the things you can't. It's so many in yoga. I use it a lot. I say there's yin types of yoga, more yang types of yoga. Even in relationships, my wife is much more yin. She sleeps 10 hours a night, and she's just saying, Mark, slow down, have a rest. And when I take that advice, it's really good for me. And I'm saying, come on, get out of bed. Let's go have lunch with Peter today. Come on, you'll really enjoy it. And she's like, no. And she does, and she really enjoys it. So it's like, I'm holding some of that yang, she's holding some of that yin, but we bring each other into balance in a way which makes the whole relationship work, and I wouldn't be happy with a very yang partner. I've tried that, it just bash heads. And she wouldn't be happy with a very yin partner. Often I'm in a very yang world of like the corporate world where everyone's pushing and driving and they're not resting. One corporate group, I gave them a 10-minute nap after training, after lunch, because they were just exhausted, And I gave them a 10-minute nap. We were in a hotel and we had pillows brought in, and they're still talking about it 5 years later. It was like the weirdest thing. And it literally, all it was like a quick sleep, you know. And then there's the other side where some of my friends are very alternative and very liberal, and they're all about the yin, and they need a bit more oomph, you know. So you do see it in the world, don't you? In a lot of different ways.
Also, for us, the idea is that when you wake up in the morning, you read yourself internally, you see how you feel in the morning. So we would normally start a morning session with our standing postures. So if, for instance, I felt very angry or I felt too much energy, too much yang, I'd stand in a yin posture and let my emotions focus on patience, kindness, tolerance and compassion. And that'll stop me from being impatient and irritable all day. If I feel knackered and I feel weak, then I would use the yang posture to raise the energy up through the body. So we balance. How long you stand in each posture would depend on how you felt for that day. And therefore that balancing of yin and yang, I think, is absolutely essential.
Yeah.
So many people get up and go into the day without even knowing they're in a bad mood, you know?
Yeah, I'm doing an online course next week. It's called Body, Mind, Breakfast. It's 30 minutes in the morning every day. And the first thing I'm going to say to people is just notice how you are. Like what side of the bed have you rolled out on? And some days it's like I'm really yang and it's like, I just need to chill it out. Other days it's like, I'm feeling a bit wimpy. I need to do a few strong sun salutations and get the blood moving in a slightly more rigorous kind of way. So, and it depends on time of year as well, doesn't it? In the season, the day of the week, there's a yoga class I go to on a Monday morning. It's quite different from the same teacher on a Friday afternoon, because you've gone through the sort of cycle of yang in the week a little bit,
That's right. One of the reasons it's lovely to train outdoors as well, because an awful lot of people forget, one, to go outdoors, but if they do go outdoors, to actually look at nature, to see the wheel turning, the wheel of the year turning, to feel the changes in the atmosphere, in the earth, and in the trees and the plants and so on. It's a very important part to understand, because we also have to harmonise with the wheel of the year. And when I studied Wicca, we had to go through the wheel of the year.
So say a little bit about Wicca, because I think you're the first person on. We have one guy, Adrian, on, who's an eco-pagan. He's an eco-psychologist. He talks about it a little bit, but it'd be nice to hear that perspective on the seasons and the listening to nature.
Yeah, and to me, that was the most important part. So the idea of everything in the universe is made up of earth, water, air and fire, and the fact that our personalities and characters are made up the same way. And to be honest, I even still teach to that as well, because you look at somebody, so you'd say an earth person would say, I do. A fire person would say, I am. A water person would say, I feel. And an air person would say, I think. And that kind of, fairly easily categorizes types of people. But when you're teaching, if you're teaching a fire person, you will inevitably be saying, calm down, take it a little bit more slowly. Whoa, you don't have to rush. If you're teaching an earth person, you would have to say, not everything is about practicality. Sometimes it doesn't matter whether it works or not. There are other reasons for doing this. If you're teaching a water person, there's positive and negative traits to each one. A water person can be like a drip, and therefore you'd have to give them fire. You'd have to say, come on, and kick them up. But they can also be the most stubborn people on earth as well. And an air person, you would have to sometimes say, just shut up and get on with it.
Right, you're thinking too much. You're making it too complicated. We use the 4 elements model in our work with coaches, and we'll say, look, there's different coaching tools, and it's also how you teach, isn't it? So the air person might need to understand the theory, whereas the fire person might be like, look, this is how you can do something with this. This is how you can achieve something. The water person, it might be like, how do you feel about this? And spending a little bit of time just checking in empathically with them. And as a good coach, you need to understand that different coachees are different, and they're motivated by different things as well, right?
No, that's right. I mean, we know that people learn auditory, visually, and kinetically. So they're either a doer, a thinker, or they look, or they listen. So you've normally got to cover all three bases, but you're right, with different people, you will focus on different aspects for them. But those, the idea of earth, water, air, and fire, you can kind of almost categorize anything into that. And I mean, if you people that do astrology or something, they will take all the different astrological aspects and break those down into earth, water, air, and fire as well.
Oh, I've done it with company brands. I've done it with departments within businesses I've worked with. I was like, oh, the HR people are a bit watery, and the sales team are a bit fiery, and the marketing team are a bit airy, and the accountants are all a bit earthy. And you really see it, and you give them a language they can understand each other in, and you help them move like each other so they get a bit more empathy for each other. Team building, I've used it. It's so many applications.
Well, and then so when you do the Wheel of the Year, you focus on the particular element for that portion of the year. So you immerse yourself in spring, into air. So you make sure you walk outside, you focus on your breathing and so on. In the summer, fire. So even through to lighting fires, doing your meditation on candles and so on. So the idea is that you absorb those elements at an intuitive level. So you don't have to utilize your thinking mind to feel the elements around you and to feel the elements within a person, because you get them intuitively. You kind of understand just by sensing, and you're able to react on an intuitive level. That works really well. Nice.
And what's your motivation these days? So you've been teaching a long time. You really are. It's a real honor actually to speak to you. I was really looking forward to it. And someone that really knows his stuff, the real deal. You've been going at it forever, and you're in that sort of senior stage. What motivates you to keep teaching the junior kids class, or the Tai Chi class? What's driving that these days?
Well, as you may well know, I've been through quite a hard time over the last few years. I don't want to go into too much, but I've had 14 surgeries on my legs. It's left me quite kind of badly disabled with my legs. And my right leg is completely fused. It's got an iron bar right the way down through the middle. I've got no quadriceps on either of my legs. So balancing, walking and moving becomes quite difficult. I kind of have to use crutches most of the time these days. And having gone through the two sort of life-threatening infections and strong antibiotics, it's kind of left me with lacking of energy. I think without my Tai Chi and meditation, I most definitely would have died. And I think that therefore I feel as if I've been gifted a little bit of extra time. And I'm enjoying using that on a kind of day-by-day basis. The thing that's motivating me most right now is to teach Tai Chi coaches. And you've probably seen the Facebook stuff I've been putting up. I've got a Tai Chi coaching program that starts in January. I've been doing a lot of filming and so on for it. It's kept me quite heavily occupied preparing my idea of the Tai Chi system and how I feel is the best way of putting it across, of teaching it, and all the things that I feel are kind of getting sidelined or lost in Tai Chi these days. I'm trying to bring that out to the fore. One of the reasons that I do a lot of posting on social media, I do a lot of blogs, is to kind of fill in the background, I think, for people. So I'm enjoying doing that. Where I can't be as physical as I was, I therefore do a lot of writing. I do a lot of coaching. Most of my coaching these days has to be done sitting down, but I still do seminars most weekends. I've got a lot of very good students. Most of my students have been with me 20 years plus, some of them 45 years plus. So kind of they kind of take care of me now, I think.
And there's seasons, isn't there, to it? Like I remember being 18 years old and bouncing off the Aikido mat. Like you couldn't break me. I was made of rubber. I had my first injury after 3 years of training. I was like, oh my God, I pulled a muscle. I thought I was invincible to that point, because I pretty much near was. I didn't break, I just bounced. And I was super fit like a cat, and now 20 years later, I'm married and I run a business and I've got a little bit of a belly, and I train. I'm still physically pretty strong, but I'm not quite as flexible or as quick as I once was. And then there's another stage, some of my teachers are in their 50s or 60s and a couple of them are in their 80s. And there's different seasons to working with embodiment work generally, isn't there? We don't have to be doing the same thing throughout a whole life.
Mm. Well, and in a way, that's what I'm saying. I'm kind of moving with the times. So now I'm trying to focus more on the Tai Chi because I feel that's an area that needs to be explored and taught. And it's the way it's coached as well, because a lot of the terminology that have been given to us, the way that Tai Chi's been handed down, really the classics is mostly in poetry, and it can be very vague, it can be very nebulous. You understand it when you understand it before you read it. So when you understand an idea, when you read it, it makes sense, but you can't do it around the other way.
That's the devil in Taoism, though, isn't it? That Taoism is deliberately kind of sort of slightly nebulous. It doesn't want to be pinned down too much. It's slightly kind of tricky to get a handle on, but it's wise if you've had the experience already before you read. You know, I read the Tao Te Ching when I was 16. It didn't make any sense to me. And then after sort of a few years of embodied practice, I was like, oh, it's starting to make a bit more sense. And then, you know, Frankie, a mutual friend of ours, Francis Bryce, was taking a few bits apart for me. I was like, oh, that makes even more sense. I
love his book. Yeah.
It's really good, isn't it? His version of the Tao Te Ching. Yeah. And it's also got a sense of humor. This is something that I think me, you, and Frankie all share. Francis Bryce, for those listening, is a colleague of mine that studied with Steve and originally connected me with him. Is this kind of sense of humor with it? That's very Tao. It's the Zen, which is sort of Taoist influenced Buddhism, as far as I'm concerned, and Taoism. They seem to have this slight sense of humor about life. The fall is that, and it's not all taking itself seriously, which is what you might imagine from rough, tough martial artists.
Yeah, and I think that therefore, if I'm good at anything, the one thing I'm very good at is being able to hold a lot of stuff in my head and put it into a logical order. And so therefore, for me to write a coaching program is probably the best thing that I can do, because I can take the classics, I can take the ideas from the classics, I can explain them in normal Western style thinking format. So I kind of throw away all the Chinese words, and put it into and relate it to ideas that most people can relate to normally. And so therefore my job now, I feel moving forward, is to have created, which I've done, is to create a coaching structure that I can teach what would be classical Tai Chi, but in a normal, practical way.
Great. And what's normally missing from Tai Chi then? Because obviously the martial component isn't there in a lot of cases. It's sort of got a reputation as the kind of, you know, slow thing that old people do in old people's homes to stop them falling over or something like that. And like, what is it this sort of philosophical roots, the martial roots? What's become missing in a lot of cases?
Well, people seem to approach it from one side or the other. They're either kind of hippies that don't see the martial aspects in it at all. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with people just doing it for health. Or you tend to get martial artists, and sort of if you go onto YouTube and you look for application of Tai Chi technique, they will normally be doing bad Aikido or bad karate or bad Kung Fu, and kind of trying to put something else in. Nobody seems to have taken the system and fully understanding it from its philosophical roots and how they're applied through a good training system into the way you apply Tai Chi techniques is very, very different to other martial arts. And funnily enough, I was talking a little while back, I was talking to, Dave Courtney, the London gangster guy who arranged all the Craze funeral and so on.
Okay, no, I don't know who you mean, but I get the idea.
Dave's a very famous guy anyway, sort of in the London gangster world. But he grew up in South London, same places. The same thing, and we at the time we were discussing doing a kung fu television program. He was going to have a television channel before he got put in prison, and I was going to teach him kung fu. It was going to be kind of a bit of humour, but a bit of philosophy along with it. And he was saying to me, Tai Chi's this or Tai Chi's that. I said, well, it's not. And he said, well, so how would you explain it? And I said, well, if you look at something like karate, kung fu, generally speaking, if you think of a wheel and a stone flying off a wheel, the stone that flies off in, say, karate would be the fist or the foot. So the body would kind of coil and spring, and it would fire the fist and foot as a projectile out. Whereas if you look at Tai Chi, the stone would be the opponent. So they would fire off of a spinning body. So in Tai Chi, a very famous part of the classics is no collapses and no protrusions. So you don't throw anything out, you don't overreach.
Yeah.
You're never empty of intention. So when you touch an opponent, it's almost like if you can think of like a spiral, and if you can think of a pinball. So the core, the spine, the sort of internal spring of the body could fire a pinball out at any point on that spiral, and that would be the thing that would fire the opponent away.
And Steve, in terms of sort of educating with the classics, then what would you recommend as study for people like myself, maybe who have done some martial arts, or people just out there listening who are just embodiment type people and they're interested? What would you recommend as some good starting places?
My blog.
Your blog. We'll link to that at the end. Don't worry, I'm going to give you a chance.
Well, the reason that I say that was someone said to me the other day, if you could train with any instructor from who's living or dead now, who would you train with?
Yeah.
My answer was me.
Right.
And they said, well, that's a bit arrogant.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, go on.
Because I've become what I was looking for. So
okay.
I studied to become that. So I had it that I wished I'd had when I was younger. So in the same way, it's quite difficult. The classics are difficult to understand.
Yeah.
A lot of people will buy classics, and they will sit on their bookshelf and they will never get read.
Yeah.
So it is difficult. And when you look at most of the translations of the classics, and actually, if you go onto the internet, there's a guy called Paul Brennan, and Paul Brennan has done an excellent job in translating a lot of the classics. But to be honest, if you kind of don't have that knowledge in the first place, it's still really difficult. I mean, it's great for me, but most other people would look at it and say, I don't get it. They need someone like me to be able to translate it for them. So I can't actually recommend any kind of books or websites even for people to kind of go to. They're better off, to be honest, studying something like Buddhism first to get the way of mind.
Yeah.
To be able to lead them to understand that better.
And I guess there's no replacement for a sort of good teacher in these arts face to face as well, isn't there? It's always about studying with a teacher.
Well, as you know, I've just been putting together a load of videos for this this course that I'm doing, and somebody was looking at some of the videos that I've done, and they said, "Look, Steve, there is an online course there that would be absolutely superb as an online Tai Chi course. Do you want us to help you do it and market it?" And my answer had to be no. I honestly believe it cannot be done that way. I've got nothing against online courses. I've got nothing against people learning that way. If they can't learn any other way, that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But it really is not enough. I mean, if you really want to understand any martial art, you've got to find a proper teacher, and you've got to find somebody that you can relate to.
I did know there was a Brazilian, there was a website offering Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts through internet training. And it cost, and I thought, at least by black belt level, you've really got to draw a line there. There's one thing learning a few basics from a website and then playing about with your friend and trying to figure them out. But, to say you're a black belt from an internet course, I just thought there's no way. It's
difficult. And a lot of people are going about McDojos and, people that are selling martial arts at a very low level and opening up franchises and chains of schools. But to be honest, that's what most people want. Most people want to eat in McDonald's and most people want to train in a McDojo. So we exist for the other group of people. But I honestly don't have anything against the kind of McDojo franchise because they fulfill a need that's out there that most people actually want. They want to go somewhere on a Tuesday and Thursday that's local. They want to go somewhere where the instructor's nice. They don't want to be pushed that hard. So it's perfect for them.
I have the same with yoga. It's kind of like, okay, some people just want to stretch and that's okay. And some people want to go deeper into it. And as long as there's a spectrum and as long as people aren't being dishonest about what they're offering, as long as it's clear, this is what it is, and it isn't complete anathema, there is some sort of heart to it, then, I can see that there's room for a spectrum of different types of yoga studios, different types of martial arts studios. And I think where it gets tricky though, isn't it? It's hard for someone to differentiate. Like, you might have to shift through a lot of chaff to get to some wheat. If you're really a sincere seeker in looking, it seems like in the modern world, we've got all this information, but you still have to learn to shift through the information.
Well, and isn't that what we've both done?
Yeah, you've got to find who's the real deal. And it might, it might be surprising. Like, someone sees like some of your funny joke memes on Facebook. They might not really realize, like, here's a genuine master. He might not look like this sort of, might be on crutches and not Japanese and, telling a sort of rude joke. But it's like, they might not realize that actually that is the part of a Taoist master, is that they're not taking life too seriously.
Well, and that's because that's what everybody has to understand. We're human, we're normal. You're only somebody who's walked a little bit further down a path, and that's it. But I get people who phone me up and they say, where are you? And I say, we're on Chatham Hill. And they're about 3 or 4 miles away. And they go, well, haven't you got anywhere closer?
Right.
And I say, well, I went to China for my instructions. So, maybe 3 or 4 miles is not too far to go. Actually,
Yeah,
why not come around your front room and we'll hold a class there.
There's definitely a difference between, like, in the 60s, there was a lot less martial arts, wasn't there? And people had to go a lot further, and people would be willing to do that. And I'm sort of thinking, God, I've got to walk half an hour up the hill to get to my class tonight, and it's really, it's just convenient at the end of the night. And I know the trainers, it doesn't cost too much money, and they're not going to brutalize me. I haven't got to learn a foreign language to study with them because they speak English. And I think it's easy to forget that, in the age of convenience, that also I think people don't value it as much when they don't travel as far. I've noticed this when people come to my courses from Russia, they're like really paying attention, or when I travel to Russia, like you travel to Czech, don't you, quite a lot? And people really pay attention to you because you've come a long way.
Well, and I had my Czech instructors were over last week. So they came over last Wednesday and they stayed till Sunday. And we had brilliant sort of 4 days training. But they brought with them their notepads, cameras, phones, and everything that I was teaching. They were making loads and loads of notes because they've got to go back and they've got to train with it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're fairly good. I see them about every 6 weeks. But 6 weeks, it's still quite a period of time.
Yeah, but from another country, that's a hell of a commitment. Okay, so we need to be moving towards wrap up here. A few things to cover yet. Is there any subjects that you haven't talked about that you think, this is something I should really give something to the listeners on?
There probably is, but I've probably forgot it already.
We've hardly talked about karate. We've hardly talked about healing arts. The time has flown by, and there's loads we could have talked about.
I think the things that we've covered are important, and we've covered the ideas of yin and yang. We've covered particularly the balance in character and so on. So, I think we've covered a lot of important territory for people, and I hope that we've given a lot better understanding of martial arts in general, and particularly Tai Chi as well. So, I don't think we've done that bad.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm happy too, actually. I feel satisfied. Before we give your websites and things, is there any final message for people?
Well, I think it's the thing that we were just saying. It's a very good idea. If you really want to learn, find somebody of good quality to learn from. It really is worth traveling. It really is worth paying the money because for me, it was absolutely life-changing.
Great. And in terms of where people can find out more about you, so they've got shikon.com for your martial arts work, right? Shikon, so SHIKON.com. Yeah. And your blog?
Shikon.com is my association. Midwaymartialarts.com is my club.
Right.
Steve-Rowe.com is my blog.
Great. And what I'll do is I'll get all the links after we've stopped talking. I'll put them on. So those of you who get this on iTunes, it's a little trickier because you can't just go through. But if you actually go to the main site of the Embodiment podcast on our main website, if you just Google the Embodiment podcast, you'll go straight through to all these links. So you can just click through and you don't have to worry about the spelling of things. Well, Steve, it's an honor. It's a pleasure. It's really flown by today. We've done an hour like that. And I just really enjoy it. If you're ever in Brighton, please say hello. And it was
I do come down to Brighton quite a bit, actually. Yeah, my favourite restaurant is the Terra.
Oh, great. A vegetarian restaurant. Yeah. Well, let me know when you're in town, and me and my wife can say hi. It'd be really nice to say hi in person.
That'd be brilliant. Okay, Mark.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. If you'd like to help us build the Embodied Tribe, leave a review on iTunes or share this on your social media. If you're interested in training globally, sign up to receive the newsletter at embodiedfacilitator.com. Until next time, welcome home to the body.